Here are a bunch of sketchbooks from 2015 to 2021. This was a period where I was using mostly Crayola Supertip markers, and they behave pretty much like watercolors. It's incredibly easy to overwork and destroy a nice watercolor painting or a nice Crayola drawing because you can't erase, so any mistakes are there forever. The one huge negative of Crayola markers is the fading over time. These guys hung in my window for about a year, and as you can see, they've just faded beyond belief. I guess that's why I was motivated to do this, because I've drawn so many pictures and I don't know how long they're gonna last. So it's a little bit of a Zen practice, like a sand painting or something like that. We'll start with this book, which is, I think, where I started with the Crayolas. Obviously, the great William Sadler from Bill and Ted's 2 and Shawshank Redemption. I think more William Sadler, some characters from Crime Wave by John Pays. If you haven't seen this movie, you should do yourself a favor and see it. I have a theory that David Lynch is either stealing from or referring to this movie with the cowboy scene in Mulholland Drive. Yeah, not a new idea or anything, but I was clearly relating EC horror comics to the horrors of my own life, which were about my father's progressive illness. Here's Tim Allen, illustration I did for Divorced Dad. The Supertips have some really nice bright colors. This green really pops, looks beautiful against warmer colors. I find that the whole Crayola palette kind of skews a bit too much warm. A lot of orangey yellows. The cool colors, there aren't so much. If you buy the 100 sets, which is what I always bought, you'd get a couple cool light colors. That was a problem. The sets also skewed dark. I like that self-portrait. I was watching this YouTube channel about this fella who obsessively collects DVDs and Blu-rays. That's really about it. You just watch this channel for this vicarious thrill of buying DVDs and Blu-rays. These guys both make that kind of content. For a short time, I was just kind of obsessed with their ability to be satisfied by physical media. On some level, I feel like I'm the same, but also never satisfied. This is a portrait of a guy who lived on the same floor as my dad in a nursing home. He didn't speak English and he was losing his mind. There was a party they had at Father's Day where they invited a local artist to draw kind of caricatures of people, and the guy drew an unflattering drawing of this man, and I felt bad for him, and I drew him that day in my sketchbook because he was a cool looking dude. But I never showed it to him or his family. I only fantasized about giving it to them as a gift or something. I remember what this was. I was trying to come up with a logo for a friend's tea company. So I don't draw animals all that much because I don't have inherent love for nature. What a thing to say. That's a nice little fox. These are two drawings of my dad, and I know that I was thinking about Dan Klaus when I drew them, and I feel like I captured a bit of Klausness, basically the silent despair of watching your loved one suffer from a degenerative disease and being helpless. This is a little drawing of the Mego Batman together. I think that's what you do. You retreat into childhood treasures. Another spontaneous drawing of my dad and our cat Lionel, both of whom I miss very much. Here's where I'm really starting to jump into these Crayolas. This is what I mean by watercolor effects. I mean, you can layer the Crayolas the same way you would layer watercolors. Every layer is translucent. You can see the construction. You can play with the depth the same way you would with a watercolor. The only difference is you're limited by Crayola's color palette, which, as I mentioned, skews warm and skews dark. I mean, the Klaus influence is undeniable. It's kind of the banality of evil, or the stupidity of evil, or the fear of stupidity. I'm not sure. I think I was just enjoying constructing faces out of these Crayola colors. Just like in watercolor, the lightest color you're ever going to get is the white of the page. These are pretty self-explanatory, I think. We're starting to see some characters from my father's nursing home appear. I would go there often at this time. This is about the year he moved in. And this is clearly a page of Johnny Craig studies. This is probably Dan Klaus. And that's it for book 1. Book 2, here we go. Oh yeah, I guess I threw this in because I like that. This is Cliff Eland, who I remember drawing in this book before I'd started making the documentary about him. I was just thinking about him a lot based on posts he was making on Facebook. Muhammad Ali, Connor and his sister. These are some faces from my dad's nursing home. My dad at the top. My grandma was not at my dad's nursing home. This is Shirley and Ed and my father again. Another one of my dad there. I like this self-portrait. These are some of the Crayola brush pens where you get them in packs of 4. I believe these are the 4 colors. And they're really good. That's one great thing about all the Crayolas. The brush tip. You can do the thick to thin, thin to thick line very effectively for no money at all. This is the first drawing of Doreen, I think, who featured prominently at my father's nursing home. This is Doreen again. And this is Pauline and Shirley and Bobcat Goldthwait for some reason. Another character. These are all characters from my dad's nursing home. And a fetus. I think I was trying to conceive of the development of my son growing at the time I drew this. Me and my dad. This is very unflattering. Myself and a Johnny Craig illustration. I like this one of my dad. I don't like this one of Pauline. These are some of the horrors of nursing homes. I think I was watching a lot of Instagram reels of people drawing with pen, and I was enjoying the challenge of making up a kind of stream of consciousness illustration where you can't go back, you can't undo, you can't erase. Here's some more characters from the nursing home, and you can see they all skew yellow, and that's because of the limited palette of the Crayolas. You can't replicate reality or photographic reality with these Crayolas, and that's what's attractive about them, is that you're forced to make compromises, and the compromises you make create interesting things. It's inspiration through limitation. If you want to do something interesting, you should put limits on yourself. Too much selection is terrible for an artist, in my opinion. Doodles. Here's one of Doreen meeting a goat. I think I was copying a photo in the lunch area. I like this one. A little study of Shirley looking out the window. This was an interaction I saw Pauline have with one of the healthcare aides. This was my dad's friend, Hank. This is the day my cat passed away. Was listening to a lot of Radio Free Bernstein, Dan Burns' radio station app. Jesus. This is in reference to some imagery that has never left me from childhood of the early Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby Hulk comics. There's an issue where when he transforms, his head remains Bruce Banner, so he wears a Hulk mask on top. It just confounded my mind. Yep. Yeah. I don't remember drawing this, but I've always loved the original Iceman design. And there it is. More Pauline. So this is the birth of my son. Essentially me starting to draw babies for the first time in my life. More nursing home encounters with my baby. drawings of my son. That's Emil Ferris, comic book artist and writer. That's Pauline, and that's Shirley. My son again. Hey, nice. That's a nice picture of Pauline, and that's my dad, and that's Shirley, and that's my son. Another stream of consciousness doodle based on true stories. Oh, I'm straight up trying to do Emil Ferris here. I like these pages. I like this. There's a lot of nice triangular compositions, and that's my dad, and that's Doreen again. I think I have all the same obsessions as the people in my generation. These are all faces from my father's nursing home. I often thought about how Doreen was young once and was probably in love. Somebody probably wooed her, and they probably had fun, wild times and joked around a lot. Yeah, I don't know. And none of that was left anymore. There's another drawing of Doreen. There's a drawing of my brother and dad. That's the thing with watercolors and Crayolas. You can't be too precious. You have to be quick, and you have to not care about destroying the piece. Otherwise, you will destroy the piece. Another drawing of Shirley. This is my son, Ike. This is a little self-portrait. This is Pauline. She came off as incredibly mean and angry at first. I don't think anyone visited her. She was very confused. And at first, she seemed very racist, but it was not true. She was not racist. If you sat and chatted with her for a while, it became clear that she was a loving person and kind and lonely. This is from a book and cartoon that I worked on about my son. These are two friends of my dad who passed away within 24 hours of each other. Harry and Connie. This is my son with Pauline. It's a nice little picture. Here's some drawings of local singer-songwriter Sam Singer. This is a drawing of the characters from the short film Cowboys that I made with my friends. I think, like many people's sketchbooks, this stuff is all just stream of consciousness. I think what they're about is the fun of improvised drawing and knowing that you can't erase a line and trying to make something to entertain yourself. Little Amy Winehouse and a bit of a Steve Ditko shout out. This is a portrait of my father and my son. It's the circle of life. For this whole period, I think I was fantasizing about making a Cowboys feature film. So I think that's coming through in these drawings. There's a few self-portraits. One of these note to self, about gratitude. My father, again. I mean, as a new parent, I think this is pretty typical. I was definitely thinking about Emil Ferris's My Favorite Thing is Monsters. Faces from an old 60s black and white film. This is one of those things you bang out in 2 minutes and then you wish you could do 100 times over, but now you're way too self-conscious and you'll never do it again. Steve Ditko. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing here. I might have been trying to wet the Crayola, which, I mean, you can do, but it turns into this smudgy mess. Amy Winehouse again. Marilyn and Shirley again. Two funny self-portraits. I like this one. This is very nice. That's Jack Kirby, and this is clearly my friend Cliff Eland. So I was probably working on my documentary at this point about Cliff Eland, and he features pretty prominently in my life. After that, this is me thinking about haircuts. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be Fassbinder, the director, or Tom Hardy. More despair about watching your loved one deteriorate. This is my son. This is my dad. And that's one of his good friends. I like this picture of these two guys because they spent a lot of time together having adventures that I really enjoyed watching. And this is John Pays. Two more delicate watercolors of women in the nursing home. This is Connor from Chow Boys. More Chow Boys characters. Yeah, more stream of consciousness stuff. And imagery from a kid's book that I was putting together about my son and I living in this desolate northern remote Manitoba community that was just a frigid hellscape. This stuff's all pretty clear. Well, there were a couple good ones in there. More drawings from my children's book about me and my son. Blah, 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 blah. I think the effect of reading so many children's books was bleeding well into my art. And I really love the book about the tiger coming for tea. So these are all my son with a big cuddly tiger. I think I was trying to impress him or entertain him. And I don't think kids of that age really care about stuff like this. I like this elephant. Kind of a sensitive portrait. Yep, more nice times together. Oh, this is a lovely picture of my son napping in his crib. These are some fun doodles. You can see how easy it is to skew into like Gen X graffiti stream of consciousness art based on pop culture imagery. Makes me think like skater imagery. I don't know, stuff, graffiti imagery, kind of pothead imagery, even though I've never been a pothead. In some level, I feel proud of being able to draw like this, and in some level, I feel totally ashamed because it's vacuous. These kind of obsessive pages come out. I mean, I know I'm not the only one who does them. And this is another little drawing of my son sleeping. This was another children's book idea. I have my son and this cool bear. My son again. I like this picture. These are some fun characters. This is definitely from when I was on set of Psycho Gorman. That's Steve, the director and writer. That's a self-portrait, unflattering. Steve again. Mason, Biocop. I forget Connor's character's name. Mason again. And this is just a thing that I never stop being interested in, which is, well, first of all, the behind-the-scenes story of Stan Lee and his connection to Spider-Man. I think it's clear that Steve Ditko invented more of Spider-Man than Stan Lee did. But I love the idea that Spider-Man teaches with great power comes great responsibility. That's his whole shtick, that he tried to sell out once and that he learned his lesson and he'll never try to sell out again. At the same time, the intellectual property of Spider-Man has only been licensed to sell junk to kids since day one. I mean, the amount of shit they try to sell with Spider-Man's face or Spider-Man straight up endorsing is fucking ridiculous. So as a middle-aged Gen X dude, I'm obsessed with the contradiction of that. I think Stan Lee passed away when I drew that. There's Stan Lee again, probably Jack Kirby, Elvis. My son, that's a nice little one. Ed Piskor. The greatest YouTube show ever made is Cartoonist Kayfabe, and I know they will appear again in my work. That's Frances Bean. I think I was imagining her as Catwoman because she had such great blue eyes. And this is Udo Kier, who recently passed away, and I miss very dearly, though I can't claim to be close to him by any means. I worked with him, and he was so lovely to me. And I drew him a couple times, and I never sent him the drawings. And I really wish I had. Also, I spent years fantasizing and eventually writing a feature-length script about cowboys in which he was to play the main villain. And the fun twist of it was going to be that he was not a bad person in the movie at all. Anyway, I never even told Udo this because I never felt the script was good enough to share with him. And now that opportunity has passed, and I regret not sending him these drawings and not sending him that script. I just want to say nice things about him because he was very kind and generous, wonderful to be around. I miss you, Udo Kier. And there he is again. He has some piercing blue eyes in real life. Franco Nero and Dan Klaus. Self-portrait, Robert Crumb. These are all obsessions. I started drawing comic artists I cared about. Emil Ferris, Eric Larson. I saw Eric Larson respond to this, and he found it very unflattering. I did not mean for it to be unflattering. I just thought it was interesting lighting-wise. All faces you probably recognize. She's the lady who wrote The Tiger That Came to Tea. And there's Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg again. There they are again. They introduced me via their show to the work of David Enos, who is here, and I love his work. Little Burt Reynolds and Sylvester Stallone. Tom Scioli, I'm going to say his name wrong. He's also on Cartoonist Kayfabe and makes comics. Ripley. There's Frank Miller drawing a car, and I don't mean to make his face unflattering, but probably would be perceived that way. This is Cliff Eland's mom, and this is Kim Olenek, my film studies teacher from university, who I had a crush on. It's a little drawing of Cliff Eland. Alan Moore, obviously. Hernandez bro, Gilbert. And this is Cliff's father, Cliff Eland's dad. More Frank Miller, Harvey Picar. I love Gilbert Hernandez. I love his work. I love all these guys' work. You can tell I'm a comic nerd. Blitz Cadet. This is my son. This is a good page. More Alan Moore. Rob Schraub, who wrote Heat Vision and Jack and Scud, and among other things. What a talented guy. Very funny. Eleanor Davis, another great comics auteur. This is my son down here, but I've never had any Jack Torrance type feelings about him, so. Kevin Eastman, Jack Kirby, more David Enos. The Spirit. This is Tim Vigil and Ed Piskor. This is when Cartoonist Kayfabe started doing shoot interviews, which are fascinating to watch. This is more of me thinking about Spider-Man selling out instantly. Selling out with a story about not selling out. I think the ink here is already starting to fade. These light colors, I guess, fade faster. It was already light, don't get me wrong, but I think it's gotten lighter. This is my good friend Alex, who lives in Boston. And this is the first time I started doing these tiny comic covers, in this case with Crayola markers. I've been doing them recently with paint markers and loving it. Stuff that's small is instantly precious, right? Obviously, a whole bunch of characters here. You just go from one to the other stream of consciousness-wise. Robert Kirkman, and then I guess I was thinking of the beard and the hair, and then I go to Dan Harmon, and then beard and the hair go to Judd Apatow, and then I guess I'm thinking these guys are all film directors with beards. So George Romero, Brian De Palma, and then Mike from Breaking Bad, who's watching me draw. This is a nice one. These are all kind of nice. And that's that. This sketchbook cover features Pandemic Bear, a character I created to entertain my son during the pandemic, and we made videos together that he doesn't even remember making now because he was so young when we made them. He was like 2. Check it out on YouTube. I can tell that I was reading Junji Ito. There we go. Fairly realistic Junji Ito, skewing, again, way too warm with the colors. This is what it is. The limitations are why you're there. You're here for the limitations. This looks like editorial art. I like this one of my son and Aileen Crum. I wish this was more flattering because she's really beautiful. My friend Cliff was in the hospital. I was hoping he'd get out soon, and he did. There's Cliff. There's Cliff in the hospital with a feeding tube in his nose. Jaime Hernandez, Daniel Johnston. This has got to be a recreation of a Daniel Johnston drawing, trying to capture some of that magic. In fact, Daniel Johnston is the total reason I started drawing with markers. His marker drawings are so inspirational. They are watercolor paintings, and that's the first time I realized cheap markers could be watercolor paintings. My son and myself, I like those too. Robert De Niro for some reason. Kind of a fun Bill Clinton. Sam Singer. I was doing the album cover for Sam. That is the album cover for a Sam Singer album. This is a nice Dan Byrne beside a little Bill Hader and a self-portrait. My son. Little Joaquin Phoenix study. So this would have been when Joker came out and everybody was drawing him on social media. And you can't help but agree that he has an interesting and beautiful face. Here's the situation. I liked this Hulk digest a lot when I was a kid. Slow Tunes. Dallas. I mean, I like some of these drawings. It's weird. It's like looking back at your diary. It's a weird thing. This is a nice picture of Pauline from my father's nursing home. Little Astro Boy. Yeah, here we go with some train of thought thing. That fucking, what is his name? Bernard Goetz, who shot people on the subway. And fantasies of the Punisher and being like the Joker, like that online video. I don't know. You can put it together yourself, I think. It's pretty simple. And it's not deep. Some interesting face profiles. Keith Giffen. Well, this page is obviously about the Zamas. That's my son, but this is Holly Zama and Jeanette Zama and Maurice Zama and Marcel Zama. And I just love the art that comes out of this family. It's a fun caricature of Fleabag. I like all these drawings. Amy Sedaris. I think we all feel sometimes like Robert Crumb and despairing just at the horror of existing. Drawing with my son. This is a picture I must have drawn after my dad hit his head. He fell. In the nursing home, the floors, they don't carpet them because they need to be usable for wheelchairs and walkers and everything. And it's a tripping hazard to carpet the floors. So the floors are hard cement with linoleum. And he fell and burst his head open. I'm finding this a little depressing. 2020. We begin at 2020. Back to pencil for some reason. And straight back to markers. Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg again. I swear this light blue is fading. Anyway, I love these guys, and I wish Ed Piskor were still with us. Toshiro Mifune. And this is my friend Cliff, who passed away at this point. I think this is right when he died. And I was editing the documentary that I had been working on about him. I miss him terribly. Obviously, remember this point in history. David Cho. Udo Kier as Akira. These are fun. Who isn't obsessed with robot characters in TV and film? Whole bunch of self-portraits. I started doing these drawings of comic panels that I love, like Rob Liefeld's Prophet here. And I love the look so much of pencil and pen comic book art, and I was trying to recreate it here. So I'm drawing these with some, I guess, PIGMA markers, those fine tip markers, and Crayola for the pencil. So that's not pencil up here. This is Crayola light gray. And obviously we have Frida Kahlo, and this is the absurd scene. Philip Guston drawing, it's Robert Crumb drawing. I think there's a conspiracy that Philip Guston kind of stole some of his own shtick from Robert Crumb. You can look that up. I drew this drawing twice, which is very rare for me, but I'm glad I did. I think the second one's a lot better. I went to a show of Norman Rockwell art once, and the number of times he drew something and painted it before the final piece astounded me. I don't have the interest to do that. When I do a picture, I exercise myself of the interest. There's Dan Klaus. And there I am looking at a Rob Liefeld drawing again. It's a bit of a drawing challenge to try to draw another drawing in perspective. And it's fun. There's something undeniably attractive about Rob Liefeld drawings. These are just pencils from a one-page comic I did about Stan and Jack. And there's me looking at a Jack inked by Joe Sinnott. Nice little portrait. Another nice little portrait. These were just doodles for an animation I was working on for my documentary about Cliff Eland. I was just sketching out ideas that I later did in gouache. I like this. Me and Mr. Wonderful from Dan Klaus's Mr. Wonderful. And a tiny little Edward G. Robinson. This is what it always feels like to be an artist. You can't stand your own work, and you feel bad about it. You feel sorry for yourself, and maybe later you realize that the work you thought was terrible was the only good work you ever did. That's when Trump got banned from Twitter. My son. More of this triangular composition. Triangular composition. This is Neil Adams, and I think about Neil Adams a lot, and I like Neil Adams a lot. And it's weird because I don't love his art so much. I'm not in love with his art. I never wanted to be like Neil Adams in that way. Although I mean, he's good at everything, sure. But I loved his personality, and I loved his confidence and his kind of know-it-all-ism. I like that he talked like a dad. And it's a tragedy we don't have Neil Adams with us anymore. He really was one of those guys who was able to hold on to his artistic skill into old age, and it was fascinating hearing him talk, I think. This is a character from Soft White Underbelly, another great YouTube series, and I think his name is Patrick, and I think there's 5-ish episodes about him, and I highly recommend anyone watch those episodes because I have nothing literally in common with Patrick, but at the same time, I have everything in common with Patrick, and I feel like we're all Patrick. Anyway, I don't want to spoil it, but he's a very nice guy who has some very colorful adventures and just deals with a lot. I think everybody has a lot on their plate. It's a good series because it's a compassionate take, I think. It's a good compassionate take on people. There's a not so great drawing of Bob Fingerman. There's my friend Cliff. There's John Waters. And me and my son. Turned 42 in this book. That's a lovely little picture of my son. Robert Crumb and this kind of devil girl archetype he created. I love that character. I think he nailed something. And I think this is Matthew Allison, who does the wonderful comic Cancor. That's everything. I hope you enjoyed some of that. I don't know. It felt very weird. Weirder than I thought. I thought I'd have concise ideas that made sense about something. But I don't know. I don't think I have much in the way of ideas. I'm just trying to survive like everybody else. Anyway, thanks. Bye.